Hey, welcome to episode 5 of the Foundations to Fortune podcast. So we are excited that it's episode 5 already. It seems like we just got started a couple weeks ago, but another great podcast, and we have a great guest today. For those that may be first time listening, the whole concept of this podcast is to talk about kind of people's origin stories, how they got their start, kind of their growing up years, what kind of lessons they learned with that, and how that's led to their success and where they are today. So that is the foundation, and I appreciate all the comments back on the previous episodes, and that people really are enjoying them. So we are going to get started here. Today we have Eddie Austin with us, and he drove all the way down from Indiana to be on the podcast today, so we're glad to have you.
Well, thank you. It was an honor to do this, absolutely.
So, and we've got a variety of things to talk about with Eddie. He's multi-talented. So it'll be fun.
I've done a bunch of things to figure out what I like to do best. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we get an hour's worth, but it seems like all of a sudden seems like 15 minutes is going, and then all of a sudden, boom! It's an hour is up here. So we're gonna jump into it. Okay. So what I always love for the guests to do is to talk about. Tell me about your growing up years. Tell me about your childhood, all those kind of years, because it seems like there's a lot of things in that childhood from, elementary to junior high or any of that shape a lot of the maybe life lessons that we've learned. So let's jump into some of that. And the other thing I love about this is even when I think I know a lot about people, but always learn a ton more.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think to start out, we don't realize until we get much older how much the identity that was built into us in our younger years. That was really the foundation, is when we're younger. And as we start to grow up, more and more things start to come out. You start to see traits that your parents did, or just the different things. I know for me, I grew up with, my parents were very much entrepreneurs, and I watched my family, my mom and dad, they had me at a much later time in life. Now today my dad's 88 or going on 88, my mom's 76.
So how old was your mom when
I think she was in her mid-40s.
Mid-40s? Okay.
Yeah, so I was kind of that only child between, I've got brothers and sisters, but they were older than me, and I was the only one between my mom and my dad. And my parents, very interesting people. Everybody probably says that about their parents, but I didn't realize until I would start to grow up and start to tell people about my upbringing and my family. Nobody believed me, because they're like, your dad had 7 airplanes and your mom's a flight instructor and private pilot, and we've got this 63-foot Sportfish yacht. But a lot of people think that you just go buy these things, and that wasn't the case for my parents. We built a lot of it. My dad was a boat builder. He worked for Rody Chris Craft back in the day in Chicago, and he's a Palm Beach native and then traveled to Chicago for work. So he learned to build boats, and just like the Sportfish, Dad spent 8 years building that. I remember laying up the hull in this thing underneath this big round tent, And I remember setting the engines in it, working with his mechanics. I was about this tall, sitting there with all over myself and just living the dream. And you didn't realize how cool that was until I tell it to people today, and they're like, wow, I'm not sure I even can believe that or not. So, so you don't realize how cool your upbringing is until you get a little older.
Yeah. So tell me about, because a lot of people may think, oh, gee, he had the golden childhood, right?
Yeah, that wasn't
boats, airplanes and all that stuff. But I think you went through some
Yeah, there's
ups
a lot
and
deeper than that.
downs and highs and lows during that time too, right?
So I know in my journey, there was this point I was fearless. Still to this day, when it comes to business, just completely fearless. I measure risk and stuff, but I think I tie that to I watched my family, be very wealthy and be very poor. It's just like summer, winter, spring. It's almost like that. They had that exact same journey in entrepreneurship. They would do very well on some things, and they would hit a season and we'd get the lowest of lows. So I watched my parents do that 2 or 3 times, from being very wealthy to going to the Bahamas every month to peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and ramen noodles,
Yeah.
not having anything. And I didn't really care. As long as I had 2 sticks to rub together, it wouldn't bother me a bit any.
Yeah.
I never got tied to the money side of that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think and thanks for sharing that, because I think a lot of people would hear that, 7 planes and going to the Bahamas and thinking, oh man, Eddie lived the golden life growing up.
No,
they didn't know the days of ramen noodles and.
No, it was tough. I remember one time, we had 8 acres in the middle of nowhere in Okeechobee, and a single wide home, and a big lake behind there, and Dad had a big nursery out front, and he had a bunch of 100 by 60 building with a bunch of boats in it. So Dad always did a bunch of different things, because when the nursery wouldn't work, maybe the boat sales was up, or if boat sales was down, you sell plants. Dad always had something to sell. I remember my grandfather, he was in flea market business. So my dad's dad would buy and sell. And that's all he did. He buy plants for $3 and sell them for $6. That's just what he did. Anything he could buy, he'd turn around and sell it. And it's kind of cool. I look to one of these days do this, but my family had the Austin Feed and Seed store. So we had a concrete business. It was right there in Pompano Beach, Florida. So they had the old style farm store, 3 generations, where they sold feed and seed to anybody that had needs for farm equipment and seeding.
Yeah. So those growing up years, I've seen the highs and the lows.
Yep.
So what kind of lessons did you learn from that's helped you throughout life?
I think number one, to just know that no matter how bad you fail, you can't lose your birthday. You can go completely broke and start over. It's okay. I'm fortunate to say in all my business ventures, I can say I've went dead broke 3 times over the last 20 years, and never filed bankruptcy, and I've never lost a single dollar of investors' money. Always been able to find a way to pay it back, keep moving. So I've always just learned to go out and fail fast and learn from that, and then pick yourself up, dust yourself off. There was a series of winning, Brian, that I found out that winning didn't teach me anything, because it seemed like everything I put my hands on, I just won. Well, through that series of winning, it's kind of when I tie back to the childhood. There was this thing that I was chasing subconsciously. I didn't really comprehend or make sense of. I was always chasing the private jet and the big yacht and everything else. And I didn't really understand why until I learned about the generational link or the curse, or what people call it.
Right. Yeah.
And I realized that everything I was chasing was money. And it was because of my childhood. I thought that was normal, to have the boat and the planes and have this lavish lifestyle. And I think I also thought that it's okay to try the biggest, wildest things, and it's okay to fail, because you can start over. It's no big deal.
Yeah, great lessons.
Great
lessons.
I mean, at the end of the day, I put myself through a lot of pain because of that, and not afraid to start over, but at the same time, I was chasing it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It's not about money.
So I remember in talking, you had mentioned that your dad, your father, so your grandpa basically kicked your dad out of the house at like 12.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's basically Dad just at 12 years old had to go on his own and find his own way. And my dad had a little more respectful way to do that. So let's back up for a second. So I had a really rough time in school.
Yeah.
I really did. There were some things that happened to me at a very young age that medically, my diaphragm had ruptured, and around 7 or 8 months old, I completely flatlined, picked up, and I was a towel. So at that moment, my mom and dad rushed me to the hospital, and when they rushed me to the hospital, I get there and they say, well, there's really nothing we can do for your son. His diaphragm ruptured, it's poisoned his body, his veins are going flat, he's gone. To reverse the things that's happened, it would take so much penicillin and other things that he'll basically be a vegetable. There's no way he'll survive it. And my dad pretty much said, well, okay, you got two choices here. You can you can go in there and do everything you possibly can, or when I come back, you'll just have a really hard time with what's going to happen next, because you're going to try. Mom's praying. She's like, give my son a second chance. And so I think some things happened through that time that I think differently. My brain's probably not wired exactly the same. So when I got to public school, if you were to tell me to do a math problem or you put something on the chalkboard, I would look at that, and they're teaching you the curriculum, right? They want everybody to learn the same way, do the same thing. So they're telling me this curriculum to get this answer. And I would look at that, and my mind immediately would go constant improvement. Like, I didn't realize what that was at that point, but I couldn't follow what they would do because it was too many steps. But I could get the answer, and I would get it in a different way. And they'd come up to me and they'd say, well, how did you get your answer?
Show me your work, right?
Show me your work. And that's it. Show me your work. So they're like, show me your work. And I would do this, and they're like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, but I got the answer.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest part, is I couldn't understand, like, in life it's getting the answer, right? You're just trying to get the answer. So why does it matter if the path isn't straight?
Right.
Or maybe it's straighter. Maybe I look at your curriculum as going like this, back and forth. I'm like, that's waste.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just, this is how you get the answer the quickest way. So the teacher, of course, would spend more time with me. The kids would see that, now Eddie's special needs. And of course, younger kids, they want to bully because you don't learn the same.
Right. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, I was the quiet one. You just never mess with the quiet one. And people would push. And I got, kind of put out of Christian school. I got put out of elementary school. And my parents were like, look, what's the issue? Because my son can get the answers.
Right.
But he can't do it by the curriculum. Well, your son he has a learning disorder. He can't learn the same as the other kids. So mom and dad were traveling at that time, another business venture, of course, like gypsies. And they put me in homeschool. So at the age of 12, my dad said, you know what, you're really good in school at this point. I want to take 2 grades a year, is basically what I said. I want to figure out how to get to here quicker. So can I take 2 grades a year and get out of school? And Dad said, well, I'll tell you what, your brother-in-law and your sister and your brother-in-law own a welding shop in Tennessee. I'll take you there, and you can learn a skilled trade. So at 12 years old, I'm now working with the men, doing my school at night, finishing out.
So kind of like your dad was out of 12, then you were almost like put out of 12.
Yeah, in a more respectful way, of course. Here I am, 12 years old, learning the skilled trade.
Yeah.
Looking back, I think my dad thought, I'm not surely what else I can teach my son, but I know if I can give him a skilled trade, he'll feed his family forever.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thought process. That's what he was thinking. And from there it just progressed. Here I am at 12 years old, welding here with the men, and got really good at it. And I was just enjoying that time, learning from the older men.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I love these kind of stories. These are awesome.
Yeah.
And this is the listeners love this, and those that are on YouTube love to hear this kind of stuff. So this is fun, because what resonates with people is the authentic side of people, and how they got to where they are today, but all the lessons that they learned, growing up. So I appreciate you sharing all this.
Well, it's the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot build foundation off pebbles. So fast forward for a minute, it'd prompt some questions, I'm sure. So when I first got in the big real estate game, building my first fund, $20 million in size, I never really syndicated. I went straight to funds because I thought, what's the quickest path? So I look at Blackstone, BlackRock, I'm like, what do they do? Have a fund.
Yeah.
What's it take to build a fund?
So you went back to those days of in school instead of taking this path. It's like, how can I get there quicker?
Yeah, why
So
can't I just go start a fund?
Yeah.
So from that, I was afraid to tell people that I was a welder, that I owned a welding and fabrication shop, because I went through the corporate world to learn how corporate worked, and I worked myself up I would get a job at a place and spent 13 and a half years in a Toyota manufacturing plant. I came in the door as a regular employee. I left as next assistant manager, and I learned the corporate structure, but I also learned that I couldn't get upset about the way my employees were being treated, because at the end of the day, it wasn't my company.
You didn't own the company. Huh?
So if I wanted to change the culture, start your own company. So I did. And from that moment, it started to come clear to me what I needed to do. So I was afraid, to say that I own a metal fabrication and a hot rod shop. And I'll never forget it. I was in a real estate conference out in Denver, Colorado, and best ever conference. And, I'm telling the story about different things. And they said, well, man, you have really diverse background, well spoke. Like, tell me about your journey a little bit. And I said, well, I started as 12 years old as a welder, and I went through the corporate world, and now I own a metal fabrication and hot rod shop. And the fireworks went off with the discussion. He goes, oh my gosh, man, you got to start sharing that.
Yeah.
And I raised a lot of money during that conference simply because I shared the real origin story.
Right.
It wasn't like verbatim, I'm a real estate guy, I do this, I do that. Like, my background was something else.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, it's so cool, man. You do a welding and fabrication.
Yeah. That's so true. It's like they just told you, you got to tell that story, right?
Yeah. Well,
It's that
everybody.
origin story. Everybody has that, and that's that's the whole part of. That's the whole point of I love about this podcast is getting all this stuff. See, that's something I didn't know about you right there. Right? Like I said, I always learn new things about all the guests that come on here. So that's something I did not know about you.
Since then, I've done more syndications than I care to talk about. And we're on fund number 2, 50 million in size. But, at the end of the day, I always talk about capital. A lot of people capital raise, they come to me as kind of an expert in the space because they've seen me do this for 20 years now. And I see people come up and they just start asking for money, for their syndication, whatever they're raising. I'm like, look, this game is, you got to deposit in somebody before you can ask for withdrawals. So it's kind of like a bank account. If you go to a bank account, say you got $100 in your pocket and you want to go take money out of your account, you got to go to the front desk. You got to ask for somebody to help you out with starting that account. You look through some paperwork. You build a relationship with that bank, and from that, you to make that deposit. And then they go make you a debit card. Now you're finally able to go around to the ATM and put in your PIN number, and you're able to physically take cash out of your own bank account. So everybody skips all those steps.
Right.
And they go right to, Brian, will you invest in my deal?
Yeah.
Well, I know nothing about you. I don't know about your origin story. I don't know if I can know, like, or trust you. I just met you.
Yeah.
They just want to ask for money, and you can't do that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the real estate game.
Yeah.
Right. Or let's talk a lot about that.
Sure.
So, how did you get your start? Where did the interest in real estate come? Right.
Yep.
So you went from, all right, learned how to weld, all this. Okay, I worked in the Toyota plant. All right, somewhere there had to be a spark of something for real estate, right? So where did that come from?
This really honed this in this past week. I just got back from a conference. I got to tell the story quite a bit. So I didn't know that I was kind of a land developer with my dad very early on. So back in 2004, I would help my dad, kind of clear land. And so Dad would basically purchase land and we would build 2 or 3 homes on it. Well, that's a land developer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that's what we were doing at that point because I was pretty young. I was really young man on a big bulldozer, moving dirt, building ponds. And
Mm-hmm.
you would, if your site wasn't balanced, you'd have to build a pond to get the dirt to build, to balance out the site.
Yeah.
So I would do that, and I'd help Dad stand up the walls, build the home. So very early on, I was always in real estate. And then we would buy raw land, do the entitlement, and we'd build the house or put utilities on it and sell that piece of dirt. So as I got bigger and bigger in business and started making more and more money, I had a tax problem.
Yeah.
And my CPA, basically said, well, Eddie, you need to buy new trucks. You need to spend money and spend your profits down. And I said, okay, well, it's what you don't know that will cost you the most.
Right.
At the end of the day. That's the magic lesson. So I'm like, okay, they're my expert, right? So I'm going to go out and buy these new trucks. And so when you buy new trucks, it doesn't mean you make any more profit. The insurance goes up, the license plate costs more. I almost expense myself out of my own business. So I started thinking about this and I was like, I'd always see Mom and Dad make money, and that with an S Corp, they would turn around and they would just take that money and buy property. And then they would develop that property. And then they would refinance that property. When you refinance, it's free. It's tax free. So it's not like you're beating the IRS, you're just playing the rules.
Right.
Exactly what they said. So I thought, well, I don't know why I missed this, so I just started doing the same thing. I'm like, okay, I make money, go buy real estate. And then I thought, well, shoot, I want to buy a lot bigger real estate. I was always attracted by the much, much bigger things. And I think that, again, I always listened to my dad. If he was going to do something, it was going to be millions.
Yeah.
And that was always think big.
Yeah.
Well, I followed kind of
Yeah.
that.
Go big or go home.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to go buy these big properties. Well, I ain't got enough money to do that. So how do I do it? And that's kind of where I discovered the OPM model. And we just accelerated from there.
Yeah.
We just, okay,
So OPM stands for?
other people's money. And I'll say it, not
Yeah,
to offend.
not everybody that is listening may know that.
That's a good
So-
thing. I think, I'm going to give you all an expert lesson here, a pro tip. When you're writing emails out to potential investors, partners, stuff like that, do yourself a favor and write those down to 3rd grade or 5th grade level. Way more people will resonate with you if you write emails in that fashion.
Yeah.
If you use the great big words, because I read 30 books a year usually. I've vastly grown my vocabulary and the way I talk, and you're 100% right. Some people don't understand the acronyms or what you're trying to say. It doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah.
So pro tip, take those investor emails that you're sending out to everybody, dumb them down. People don't understand depreciation, cost segregation. They don't understand that stuff.
No.
But if you tell them, look, I can help you save on your earned income, and even earned income. Hey, look, what you're making, you can be taxed the highest amount on, and I have a way that I might be able to help you. And then let them come to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you learned how to basically building some homes with your dad, clearing land, building homes, things like that. And then let's fast forward and tell me a little more there. What did you do from there in the real estate game?
So this is where it all got sideways. This comes the first fail point. Nobody multitask well. And making money in this business, make more money in this business. So here we get to a point where the serial entrepreneur title comes in. My wife and I end up, I would say semi on purpose, start 8 different companies over a period of time. And at that time, none of them complemented each other. I was just chasing money.
Yeah.
And because all I needed was more money, just feed the machine. Well, remind me of that because I got some really good lessons on that. So let's come back to that. So at these 8 different companies, we're burnt down all the time, and I can't execute well. And you cannot do a bunch of things and be a master any of them.
Right. Yep.
So these companies start to come unwound a little bit. I end up buying another company that goes completely sideways because, I'm just used to winning at this point. Everything I do, it seems like it just works. So I buy this company and it goes grossly wrong. And I am stuck with holding the bag on all of it. And I ask myself, how in the world did I get myself in this situation? Well, it's because I was so good at winning that anything that Eddie Austin puts his mind to, we're going to do well at it. Just strictly faith-based. I had faith twisted completely wrong. So from that phase, it's like, okay, we got to get back to the basics. So we started dissolving some companies, selling some companies, just completely backing ourselves back out from that and repivoting back to, we're going to do one thing, one vertical, and it's all about real estate. So yes, we might coach and mentor people, but we do exactly what we say. And we're owning real estate, we're renovating real estate, we're doing all these things, but it all complements down to one. So just like multifamily, I own a construction business, I own a general contracting business. So yes, we buy multifamily, but when we renovate it, it's done through our own company. We are general contractors that come up and renovate our properties for us or do the dirt work for properties. So all of those businesses now complement each other.
Yeah.
And I make enough money that I can employ people underneath me, so I don't need to be the CEO of 8 different companies anymore.
Yeah.
So much different look. So we accelerated that path to, buying a couple properties and more properties to get where we are today.
Yeah. No, that's a smart move. It took us a while to learn that.
Yeah.
Where we have a real estate company, we have a property management company, right? It's all real estate related.
Right.
We own a business brokerage company, so we help people buy and sell businesses, but 30% of those businesses have real estate attached, right?
Yeah.
So to your point, it all complements. They're all congruent, it took us a while to learn that as well. So
well, I think a lot of times, and I know many people that do this, a lot of people come up to me and they're like, I want to own multifamily doors. I want to do exactly what you've done. And they think that I got rich through real estate. And that's not exactly the case. Real estate has always been the wealth preservation. Real estate has always been the 2 and 3x multiple over a long period of time.
right.
I think this is where we come full circle to what we were talking about, the making a bunch of money. I did really well in business and I need to get rid of my taxes. So my complement to that business was to take that money and invest my overages into that real estate journey. And then that paid me 2 and 3x returns. So that grew my money with just very little management on that side. A lot of people get that backwards. They think, well, I'm going to go buy all these apartment buildings and make all this money. You certainly can, but get good at business first. Make money in business in some form or fashion. Like your business model is perfect. You're selling real estate and you're probably end up managing that real estate on the back end and you're still making arbitrage on that. So a lot of people get that backwards. They think that I'm going to start with owning a bunch of multifamily, but you got to have money first.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to make money, learn how to run a business.
Yeah.
Just because we might own a 400 unit apartment building, it's still a business. It has employees, it has contractors, or it has invoicing.
Yeah.
Your customers are tenants.
Yeah.
How does it look in front of the business on the Google side? Does your Google reviews look good?
Right.
How does that look on the website? How are you treating customer service? That's all super important. If you can't get that right, you'll never do very well for your investors.
So that's interesting. You kind of talked about the first time that you might have failed.
Yeah.
And it had to do with you had different businesses that didn't really have anything to do with each other, and so you learned some lessons through that.
Hard lessons.
A lot of them, I'm sure.
Yep.
We'd spend another hour talking about that.
100%.
From there.
Right.
And then, so you talked about, you had a couple others, right?
Yeah, so the first one was...
Not to concentrate on that.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a lot of lessons that, and I agree with you that, that yeah, there's lessons, yeah, you can get from winning, but your biggest lessons in life come from the failures.
It comes from the failures.
Right? So,
I think I coach a lot of people now. I mentor a lot of people. Some of them just one-on-one, and from that, a lot of people want to know what's the golden ticket to everything. And I tell them, look, I can teach you a lot from my lessons, but at some time, you've got to go out and fail on your own, because some of these lessons look different for everybody, and you have to learn them. The only way you're going to learn them, you can't go to college for this stuff most of the time.
Right.
So you got to go out here and learn it. You either earn it or you learn it. So earning it was my path. I earned all these battle scars. I learned all these white and gray hairs in my beard.
Yeah.
I started out with a full, beard and growing a long goatee to it looked like salt and pepper to who spilled the salt. This is all I'm down to. And so from that very moment, I started to realize things much differently. I started to think outside the box. And I was like, all these lessons have taught me a lot, but what does this really mean? What's the real journey in life? And I hope your listeners are listening up, because this is going to be a really good lesson for anybody. And it was kind of that real switch in my mind to start really thinking about things.
Kind of that aha.
Right, that aha moment. At the end of the day, we're all chasing one thing. I'm sure our host is chasing one thing, our co-host is chasing one thing. It's you're trying to make enough money to go wherever you want, whenever you want, and take whoever you want with us. At the end of the day, that's what we're chasing. It's all looking different for each and every one of us on that journey, but that's what you're chasing. It's enough money to do that. So get your time back. And there's kind of like this line in the sand that it's like the first half and the second half of your life. It seems like that line is usually drawn around 40 years old, some earlier, some later. I retired from corporate America at 36, never looked back. But I started measuring things differently, because from that 0 to the 40-year stage, all I cared to do was make as much money as I could. That's all it meant to me, was make as much money as I can. Now, when you make more, you spend more, you pay more in taxes until you get smarter. The second half of life really comes down to, I measure things on time. It's not money anymore. I want my time freedom. So if you send me a deal and I can make $300,000 on it, but it requires 30 hours a week of work from me, that's not enough. I'll say no to that deal, simply because I can't employ somebody else and pay my bills for $300,000 a year. It's not going to happen. Every business dies by cash flow. Just like real estate, every business dies by cash flow. So I started saying, okay, before I say yes, what does it cost me? I want to know what it costs, not money. I want to know what it cost me time-wise. And that's what I started to measure. And from that phase, I'm like, okay, well, maybe that number's $1 million a year. If you send me a deal and I can make $1 million a year and spend 30 hours a week, I would be able to pay somebody $250,000 a year that's in the first phase of their life. They're happy to do that, to make $250,000 a year. And then I can take that and take my systems and processes from everything I failed on and instill systems and processes, empower them to be a younger version of myself, run this business that makes $1 million a year. The business still makes $750,000. I can live off that. They make $250,000, and it's a beautiful circle. So you have to get really, really good at saying no. Because when you're young and you're on your come up, you'll say yes to everything. Everything looks appetizing, everything looks delicious, and you're just going to go for it because you see dollar signs. Yeah. And from that very moment, I started to really think through, I'm going to stop saying yes, and I'm going to start going, no, 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 maybe this one fits.
Yeah. No, that's I love that. I love that lesson. So we had one of my previous guests on here, and he talked about how he got to his kind of financial freedom number, right? Okay, this is what I needed to do real estate. This is how much maybe I needed to have that financial freedom. But it was also not just the financial freedom, but that that freedom gave him the freedom of time.
That's it.
What you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So he could spend the time with his family and with his young kids and go travel the country and all of that, right? So when he was talking about financial freedom, it was more than just, this dollar amount. It was, this dollar amount, but what this dollar amount did for me is gave me my time.
Yep.
Right? The time to spend with family, the time to travel, the time to do the things that, we really, really enjoy.
Sure.
Right? Doing. And so yeah, I love that. I love that life lesson. But what you're talking about too is, a lot of people coming up, there's a whole host of us. I was the same way, right? I was in corporate America, early on, and so I was doing the same thing, right? Chasing that next dollar to the dollar to the dollar.
Yeah, of course.
And it takes us, took a lot of us to get to that point.
Of course.
Sounds like you got there quicker than I did, as far
I don't know.
As far as
You know.
the time
So,
freedom.
Yeah, maybe so.
So
I laugh because it was, I think, maybe last year, year before, our regional property manager was on a phone call. So we do monthly calls with all our properties. And, somebody had said something about retirement or something like that. And I said, well, I retired at 36. And she goes, well, Mr. Austin, you don't seem very retired because you work a lot. Now, I didn't say this to her, but my immediate thought is, yes, I do work a lot, but I have 100% control of my time and what I say yes to.
Yeah.
If I don't want to be on that call, I don't have to be. And that's the difference. Somebody in that seat has to show up every day. I don't have to. Somebody else could show up in my place. Or because of my time and ability, I can execute on things much quicker than other people, because when I step into the office, I've already been to the gym, I've already done all my daily rituals, I've done all that stuff, and when I come into the office, I execute at a very high level very quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm completely clear and free. I know what needs to happen.
Yeah, because I saw this morning something from you on Facebook that said, "Who's in the 4 a.m. club?" So I know you were hitting up all your followers, going, "Okay, are you guys up at 4 a.m. hitting the gym
100%.
like me?" Right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, at the end of the day, that's the cool part. Is this morning I actually woke up. The alarm was set at 4:35. I opened my eyes about 4:05 this morning, and wide awake. And I realized when I was employed, you'd almost beat the snooze button, clear off your alarm clock, because you just didn't want to get up. Like you were drained.
Yeah.
That was another thing I started paying attention to, is I'd walk up to the mirror and say, if I had 2 weeks to live, would I go do what I'm about to do today over the next 2 weeks? And when I started to say no for too many days, I switched. That's why I did a bunch of things when I was younger, because I didn't like what I was doing. I wasn't passionate about. And even to this day, if you work for me, if you're employed by me, and I can see that somebody's low on passion and they're just not executing like they used to smile and laugh, I'll say, I think maybe you should take a week or two off, and you should just go relax and find yourself. And if they come back, if they fall in the same rut, I usually let them go. But I usually sit down with them and say, look, there was a point where you were really passionate about this podcast and you were doing amazing at it. And you're not doing that anymore. Maybe, do you want to go do something else in life? Yeah, I really do. I think I'd like to go do something else. Well, I'm going to give you permission to go do that. I'm going to empower you to do that. I think you're going to be madly successful at it. Because I have this rule that nobody works for me once they lose their passion. Yeah. Because I don't want to, life's too short. You can't employ people that don't love spending time with you and doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So let them go.
That's an interesting point. And I'm trying to remember whether it was on a show or a podcast I was listening to. But they had the founder of Netflix on. And did you?
I didn't hear that.
Okay, so they had him on, and he talked about firing people.
Yeah.
Right? Talking about, how to, they ask him, so how did you go about it? How did you make it so it wasn't, just a negative, and he said he'd always sit down with people and, and just say, before he'd even let them go, he would say, you know what? He goes, if you want to go do something else, he's like, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop you. That may be a great thing to do. Find something that you're very, very passionate about. And so it basically give them the permission to leave.
Exactly.
To go.
Yes.
To go somewhere else.
Yep.
Right. Kind of what and I listened to that and I thought, and he said it much better than I did, but I was just like, wow, that is really interesting. And I was like, well, I would love to had that concept when I was in corporate America, managing hundreds of people.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
To kind of have that same kind of mindset, what he did.
Right.
Of how he approached that.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, man, that's genius.
At the end of the day, sitting across from several people I've let go, quite a bit, honestly. You almost see the weight just kind of fall off their shoulders because they have this obligation to me to perform. And they have this obligation to achieve our vision of our company and everything else. They're very much invested in the company. But at the same time, they have maybe been around me enough or around other people enough that they're catching that entrepreneurial bug.
Right.
And they want to go do it. They don't want to let me down.
Yeah.
So they don't want to put in the 2 weeks. And also it's scary when you step out on your own. I remember when I thought I needed to make $1,200 a week or I couldn't leave the job. And when I figured out how to remove the hour per dollar ratio and flip it around where I can make $1,200 in 1 hour if I wanted to. That huge weight is lifted from them when you say, I see that you're really thinking on something else.
Yeah.
And I like that. I do. And then they start to get interested. So it's an exciting conversation. And at the end of it, it's kind of cool because at the end they're like, so I guess I don't need to come in tomorrow unless you want to.
Yeah.
You can take a vacation and then see what you feel like when you come back. Maybe take a vacation, go try that for a week. And if that works, maybe come back. But it's kind of cool at the end of it. So I'm fired? If you want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you feel like you're still passionate about this, you still got some fire in you, let's go.
Yeah.
But if you don't, I'm giving you permission to go do your thing.
Yeah.
And I believe in you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically what he said. He's like, I gave him permission to go do something else. Whatever they, choose to want to do.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, hey, I'm giving you the permission.
Yep.
And I was like, I love that concept.
Well,
I really liked that.
There's another thing, Brian, and it seems like all of us, when we think about doing something new, we're held back a lot because we don't give ourselves permission either.
Yeah.
I don't know who we think of subconsciously has to give us permission because we're our own person. But it seems like you also have to give yourself permission to go do this other thing.
Yeah.
And some people take a really long time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
So let's kind of talk about what you're doing now, what you got going on, and all that kind of stuff. Because, like you say, we're, time goes by so fast, and I want to make sure
it's a blip.
I want to make sure we get to kind of what you're doing now, and so people kind of know,
So, throughout this journey, I remember when I left my first, my last W-2. I had a good mentor, and this will all tie together. I had a good mentor. He basically asked me the question that left me the longest 45-minute ride home, and it was, Eddie, can you imagine what you'd be capable of if you didn't have a job? And of course, we all joked about that. We stood in front of the mirror, we joked with our friends about not having a job, what it would look like, your spouse, whatever. And when somebody that was way ahead of me, and I didn't even know was a mentor at the time, when he asked me that, it really clicked. And at that moment, it was on. It was like that permission. And it was a very accelerated journey from that point forward. And it was just figure it out. So I had kind of created this kind of fictitious mountain that I wanted to get to. And I had made it to this point. And I didn't like what the path of destruction looked like behind me, because to get here, I never lost my character, never lost my integrity, but I worked really hard. I watched my kids grow up in pictures. Still married to the same wife, still have the kids, but I was not home a lot. We were definitely on fire with this. So I get to this point, and the deals don't excite me anymore. Buying the business doesn't really excite me. I'm just kind of going through the motions, and I kind of lost my own passion. And I kind of started talking to some people, and I kind of talked to my mentor again, and I said, I don't really know what this is not what I thought it would be.
Right.
The hills and the valleys were fun, but I think I just enjoy the climb anymore. I just enjoy the journey. It's not the destination any longer. And he goes, well, you've made it, but he goes, there's some problems. And I was like, well, I'm all ears, so please tell me what the problem is. He goes, see, Eddie, you've done really well for yourself. He goes, I'm proud of you. He said, there's some issues though. On your bio and on your social media, you made it, buddy. You've got serial entrepreneur, you got fund manager, you got all these other things up here, but there's one thing you haven't done yet. And I said, well, what's that? He goes, philanthropy. You haven't become a philanthropist. And he goes, that's really where it all comes full circle. You're not doing anything to give back. And I said, oh man, I don't know what that looks like. And he goes, oh, come on, Eddie, you're smarter than that. He said, think about it. You have definitely done it. You have 20 years of a wild path. And it's been fun, and it's fun to hear you tell your story. But now, I challenge you. Can you teach somebody to do what you've done, what's taken you 20 years to build? Can you teach somebody how to do that in a year? And I went, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take everything that I've done, because I've always cared a lot about other people. In relationships and emails and partnerships, I've always thought about before I spoke or when I was speaking, how does this other person receive that? How is it going to make Brian feel if I send this email? And I think the best thing you can ever do is write an email or a text and read it and then delete it. And then write it again. And if you still can't hit the send button, don't send it. Call the person up and say what's meaningful from your heart, because words can be interpolated.
Right.
So, do that delete method, because you might have wrote it first in anger, and you send that email, and I want to understand how does it make you feel as a person when I send this. So,
yeah, there's somebody in this room that understands that when it comes to my emails.
Of course, because you're the business owner, you're this hard, shrewd person, and sometimes you're in beast mode of working, and you've got to get that email to her before the end of the day. So you're just ripping it out, and you hit send. You never thought about what it might feel to her when she gets that, or how she reads it. So I'm like, okay, so I absolutely have a lot to teach somebody. And because I was so charismatic about others, I've always wanted my monthly number is $100 million a month. Is really what I wanted to make, is $100 million a month. Want to scale businesses up, sell them for $1.2 billion every 2 or 3 years. And why is that? And I think it's because I know I want to change this world big time. And from that, I want to give away half of the proceeds, everything I make, and just change. And he knew that. And he said, Eddie, I understand your monthly number, what you're trying to do, all that stuff. He goes, but again, buddy, that's the egotistical goal. It's money. It's all about money. He goes, you have so much to give that it's not about that. How to give back. And I said, okay, so it's education. So now today, it took about 2 years to kind of really think through that, spend a lot of alone time, and then think through how do we really help people get to where we are. And it come down to mentorship. I never thought of myself as being a mentor, but it feels really good. So I kind of made a roadmap from start to finish, and do it way faster with much less mistakes. Lessons cost money. Good lessons cost lots. I've certainly learned my lessons. So I took that and put it all in kind of a framework, had a partner come on with me. We kind of built this framework out. Now we can take somebody from from the business idea, from starting the business card to purchasing your first property in the first 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And an accelerated path. And also learning how to make money through that phase.
Yeah.
Because you can't just go buy the property and expect it. You got to start small.
Right.
You know, like I started in single family.
Yeah.
And then worked my way where I am today.
Yeah.
And went and did that for free a couple times just to trial it, just to see if the proof of concept would work. And I called him back up and I said, I cannot tell you how happy I am. This feels amazing. And he goes, yeah, really? Tell me about it. And I said, I just taught somebody how to do this all the way through, and it changed their life.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's what it feels like to be in philanthropy.
Now you got it.
And he goes, and it's not money. And he goes, there is a monetary gain to this. People will pay you to change their life. And he goes, the thing is those two people, you must have been really, really connected with them, because most of the time when you give something away for free, they don't take the initiative.
Yeah.
I built courses, I know, starting out, and I would try to give them to somebody. And I could watch on my CRM or my platform, if they actually watched it, they wouldn't finish the course.
Yeah.
But if you gave me $300 for the same course, you watched it all the way to the end.
Yeah.
So I learned I couldn't just give it away. I
Yeah.
had to have somebody pay for it, and also prove the highest investment you'll ever make is the investment you put in yourself.
Yeah, in yourself. Yeah.
And you will miss 100% of the shots you won't
Yeah.
take. So take the shot, invest in yourself. You'll 100x the returns.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, today you're very successful in the land development game, very successful in the multifamily. You got your mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. So, let's kind of end with what is the number one lesson that you would like to share or leave with our listeners, and then follow that up and talk about how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
And we'll have all of your information too on
Sure.
the podcast. But
The number one
share.
thing that I would tell my younger self is learn that line in the sand and stop trading hours for dollars. You have to at some point, and maybe you're very fortunate to make a lot of money in your W-2, but don't be afraid to start a side hustle and invest in yourself, and pay the 10, 20 grand to invest in yourself and learn a new skill. And don't be afraid to fail. I mean, go out and fail fast and just learn from it. And you can start over 100 times. I mean, some of the books I read, Henry Ford, all these guys, you know, they came from almost nothing.
Yeah.
They're very inspirational. I do everything I do today at a very extraordinary level because I hope to inspire somebody else. So what I would tell you is the number one lesson is that living the first half and second half, it doesn't need to be 40 years old. I'm hoping to meet with a young kid that's 18 I met in this conference, and he came up to me, and his wise, his father passed away, his mom has worked a hard job her whole life. He's wanting to get into real estate so he can change the family name forever. And he's 18.
Yeah.
22 years ahead of where that normal line is in the
Right.
sand.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to help that kid.
Yeah. No, I love that, because a lot of people ask me about, you know, being a broker and being in real estate and working with, you know, a lot of people that, you know, be like the Eddie Austins that own, you know, hundreds and thousands and doors and that. And I tell people, you know what I enjoyed most is working with that first time
Mm-hmm.
buyer of multifamily.
Yeah.
I love to work with them and put them on a path that, you know, 6 to 8 years down the road, they can live a life by design.
Yeah,
Right?
100%.
They'll have enough, you know, they'll have enough income, they can do whatever they want, right?
Yep.
I was like, that's where my real passion and joy comes from.
100%.
Yeah, I love guys like you, don't get me wrong, but that's where my real passion
Sure.
is, right? So I love to hear that.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
so-
what you figured out in just different words is I'm a reverse engineering specialist when it comes down to that. And you're basically, somebody's come to you and they want to go buy something. You're probably coaching them on what they can buy on their first time. So they got a monthly number, but they don't really have the business plan yet. And you're like, look, start right here and then work yourself backwards in this, and you'll kind of be able to buy the next one and the next one.
Yeah.
So you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're manifesting the destination. If you know where you want to be in 5 years, and you know what that number looks like, the rest is just engineering it out.
Yeah, so for those that are listening to this podcast, this is your man when it comes to mentorship right here, right? So Eddie is awesome.
Thank
He
you.
has a great heart, very faith-based, if that's okay for me to say.
100% faith-based. I encourage that.
So just when it comes to having people who are honest, ethical, and have integrity, this is the guy you want to get mentored from right
Thank
here.
you.
So Eddie, tell us how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first, maybe there needs to be a 2.0 to this, because I'm going to just share this since we talked about faith.
Yeah.
The number one thing is if you don't put God first, your kingdom will crumble. Ask me how I know.
Yep, exactly.
Best way to probably get in touch with me, EddieAustinBEX.com. The BEX stands for Be Extraordinary. You'll find it on every social media platform. You can even type in on Google, you can type in hashtag Eddie Austin, EDDIEAUSTIN, BEX.com, or just put BEX and hit search. Ignore the color code. Everything that I do comes up on Google, probably 3 or 4 pages worth, or just EddieAustinBEX.com.
Okay. Well, thank you. I really appreciate
welcome.
your time. I told you that hour.
It goes by quick.
An hour and 5 minutes. It went by real quick, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, we could have a 2.0 because we didn't get to half of the other items I wanted to talk to you about. So
Yeah.
maybe I need to start doing 2-hour podcasts.
I've seen a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
I just recently drove to Orlando and back and for a conference, and I did that because I work a lot, but that's my time to listen to those 2 and 3 hour podcasts.
Yeah, I'm not quite like Joe Rogan where they're like 3 and 4 hours, or a Sean Ryan who's like 3 hours or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
But really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time. So thanks everybody for watching and listening to episode 5 with Eddie Austin, and we'll look forward to seeing you when it comes to episode 6 in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you all.